Hi, everyone. This is Krista Moore with K Coaching, and we're so excited to bring to you the Krista Moore Talk Show today. We are live, and I have a special guest. Her name is Susan Hyatt. Susan, I'd like you to join in the call today. And Susan is a master certified coach and a newly released author of the book Barre. Hi, Susan. How
Hi,
are you?
I'm thrilled to be here.
Yeah, it's great to see you. And so some of you may know that I met Susan in October. You had a big yacht party and you
Yay.
were launching Bear and also doing a little bit of an event. Had a wonderful time and so thankful that you accepted my invitation to be on the show.
Oh, I'm delighted. I was flattered to be invited and I can't wait to dive in.
Yeah. So I want to introduce you to my audience because I think that you have a wonderful story, and then I want to also dive into your new book, Bear, and give us a good sense for what that's all about. So why
Yeah,
don't you start first and just tell us about Susan?
absolutely. Hi, everyone. I am a life coach and an author. This is actually my second book. Prior to becoming a life coach, I'm about to celebrate my 12th year anniversary as a coach. I was in residential real estate sales, and prior to that, I was in marketing and public relations. And so I understand many of you are sales professionals and entrepreneurs, and so I understand the spot that you're in. I have two kids, Ryan and Emily. They are 20 and 18, and I've been married now almost 26 years. So over the years of marketing and sales, I started to notice that even though I was great at selling real estate, it really wasn't my passion. And I have a lot of love for that industry, but I don't know if any of you have ever felt that way. But I felt very much like there was something else for me, but I didn't know what it was. And my kids were little at the time, and I was hustling to sell houses and just losing myself every year that went by. And then feeling really guilty about not being more grateful for having this beautiful family and a thriving real estate practice. And it just created this spin cycle of doubt and guilt and despair. And I started digesting every self-help book I could get my hands on. And it started with a book called Finding Your Own North Star by Dr. Martha Beck, which I do highly recommend.
Great book.
Oh my gosh, just like the best book, I think the best self-help book ever written. And through my own journey, became a coach, decided that, wow, I was making changes in my life that were making a huge difference, and decided to transition into starting my own life coaching practice, which no one where I live in Southern Indiana knew what a life coach was. It was a very risky move to most people. But I started my practice and never looked back. And about 9 months into my practice, I was 40 pounds heavier than I am today. And I really started to evaluate what I was doing with food and alcohol and not exercising, and realized that all of the answers that I needed were from that mind-body connection.
Yeah. And you know, when I read your story in the book, by the way, I got my case of books. They arrived yesterday, so I was so excited. And I'm diving into it last night and reading it this morning. Fabulous, fabulous book. And I love the way that you tell your story in there because it kind of makes you real, you know?
Yeah.
And I feel like there's a connection between a lot of women that go down that same path.
Mhm.
They're not sure if they're living their true purpose, or they're not loving themselves as much as they should be. And you give some really strong facts in there about how women get obsessed with their body and their image. And
Right.
you learned a lot of this through your studying, but also in your coaching practice as a life coach. Why don't you tell us some of your findings as it relates to how women, see themselves?
Well, like most women, I found myself thinking really negative thoughts about my appearance and my body on a consistent basis. And 97% of women view their bodies negatively. And I'm sure of all the women watching the replay or watching this live, I'm sure there isn't a day that goes by that you don't either judge your physical body, your weight, your whether or not you're aging in some way. And by the time a woman is my age, I'm 45, she has dieted on average 31 years of her life, and she's tried on average 60 plus diets, or she's attempted to diet over 60 times. And so when you think about that, we have girls and women distracted by this elusive, ever-changing standard of beauty that changes per decade or even more rapidly given social media. We have a whole population not living their best life and not living up to their potential because we're so exhausted and depleted from trying to keep up an appearance. And that was really when I became a weight loss coach.
Mm-hmm.
I found that I was much more interested in that part of it.
And it's almost understanding, what's missing, what's the gap, or why is food the replacement, so to speak. And I mean, I'm right in that category, and I'm glad to hear those high statistics only because I know that I'm not alone, right? I was mentioning earlier, Taco Tuesday last night with my mom, happy hour, then Taco Tuesday, margarita, split a margarita. I mean, I felt like a balloon today. And I was telling, but why do you wake up in the morning and that's the first thing you think? It's like, oh, I felt like crap. I mean, no one wants to feel that way, right? But I think it's common. One day you do, one day you won't, you don't. And a lot of it does have to do with what you're putting into your body.
Well, it does. And the thing is that, no wonder. I talk a lot about, I don't know, Krista, if you're familiar with the phrase, the invisible workload of women. But it's a coined phrase. It popped up a couple of years ago, and it basically refers to the fact that no matter how evolved our partners are, and no matter how compliant our children are, let's just pretend everybody lives in a house where everybody does what they're supposed to do with chores and pitching in. Women still have what's called an invisible workload, which is we're doing a lot of the emotional heavy lifting for the family. We're the keepers of all the things typically. We're the ones, I have a new story in that my 20-year-old Ryan, when he was little, I don't know if any of you watching your kids ever did this, but when he would get mad, he would say, "I'm not talking to you." And I would always joke back and go, "Do you promise? And for how long?" And now that he's 20, he was mad at me and he sent me a text and said, "I'm not talking to you." And I laughed. I was like, okay, whatever. Well, a couple of weeks went by. He was serious, and I was laughing because sitting at the kitchen table with my husband, he was getting all the daily texts from the 20-year-old, the request for money, and can you help me with this? And I was just giggling because it felt a little bit like a vacation. But my husband came to me very sheepishly, and he said, "Would you happen to know where Ryan's vaccination records are?" And I was like, "Oh, why, yes, I do, because I am the keeper of all the things," right? So with that invisible workload, women are supporting their families and their communities, and they are also struggling internally with this invisible workload. And so food and alcohol becomes an easy coping mechanism that's available at all times. And what I want to help women do with the Barre Process is turn more towards themselves and becoming devoted to what their goals are, what their interests are, instead of putting their needs on the back burner.
Yeah, thanks for sharing that. And I really want to make sure that we emphasize that the Barre Process is not a fad diet.
No.
It's about really loving ourselves. And you were telling the story at the beginning of the book about your coach that you had when you started your coaching practice, and how she would ask you to say to yourself, "Susan, which choice feels like love?" And that really resonated with me. I even used it this morning on one of my girlfriends. I was talking to her and she was having a hard time making a decision, a big decision about a trip, whether she should take it or not. And she deserves this trip and she should be doing this, but I'm not going to tell her that. It's her decision. And I used that same language. I said, "Well, what feels like love to you?" and then she's gonna, I bet she goes.
Yes. Well, I mean, that question is a question I ask myself daily about lots of things. And you're correct. This is not a weight loss plan. This is a life gain plan. And the focus is really on love. And so that question is a real disruptor because we tend to make pro and con lists. And when you ask the question, what feels like love? I mean, some days what feels like love is getting to work. It doesn't mean we're just going to sit around and eat a bag of Doritos, because quite honestly, that is rarely what feels like love.
That's
But
right.
when we deny ourselves pleasure, we go looking for it in places that aren't healthy. So what feels like love is a great litmus test that anyone could start practicing today, whether it's work related, food and body related, parenting related, right?
Yeah. So you have this, it's a trademarked seven week kind of 7-step process. I wish we had time to go through all 7 steps, but what I would like to give the audience today is a little taste of that. And if you could maybe highlight 2 or 3 of the ones that you think they could implement right away or start making some changes in their life toward.
Absolutely. My favorite, or one of my favorites, is the first week, which I call environmental diet or environmental detox. And so we tend to focus on food. What are we putting in our bodies or not? And I think it's actually more important to start with what's coming at you through all your senses, not just your taste buds. So what are you watching? What are you listening to? Who are you hanging around? What are the peer conversations you're entertaining? And be a detective in your life for a little while and pay attention to what you're tolerating and see if you can't curate something, whether it's your Facebook timeline, your Instagram feed, what you're seeing on LinkedIn. But often when we take the blinders off and start questioning everything, like, why do I let the kids pick the music in the car? Why am I letting my spouse or partner put violent TV shows on right before bedtime? Why do I sit and listen to the person in the cubicle next to me about the latest fad diet when it's boring, right? So when you start to make those kinds of changes, all of a sudden you free up your mental capacity to make change. So one thing I want to challenge everyone to do is to take a look at curating your environmental diet. Another favorite of mine is I talk about food in a really different way. There are no foods off limits in my world. However, if you have an allergy or an extreme sensitivity, right, you get to choose. It's your unique body and system. But I categorize food into 2 areas. One is power food, meaning foods that power you up. And that's different for everybody. It's not just like taking a dietitian's plan and saying like, oh, a kale smoothie is good for me, therefore I'm going to drink it. How do you feel after you drink that kale smoothie? Some people feel bloated and it doesn't feel so good, right? And then the other category is pleasure food, which foods that are just for the pleasure of how it is with your taste buds, right? And there can be overlap, but exploring that and not denying yourself, the deprivation mentality of diet culture is what keeps women, we were talking about before we started the interview, gaining and losing the same 20 pounds. That comes from extreme deprivation. And listen, women have so much willpower. You do not need more willpower. What you need is more pleasure in your life.
Yeah, and that was one of the steps that I was really curious about. I'm thinking, pleasure, what does she mean by pleasure? And when I was reading into it, it's really just self-happiness. It's doing the things that give you joy, and we don't do enough of that, right? And if I have a choice of, am I going to go into the cupboard and get, the chocolate chip cookie, or am I going to go take a nice relaxing bath? What I really want to do and what would be the most pleasurable would be that nice, quiet time and soaking bath.
Right. And I think when I say pleasure, when I tell women they need to become devoted to their own pleasure, their minds go immediately to intimacy, which is one form of pleasure. But there's like diversifying your pleasure. It could be that you do need comfort, or that you need physical touch, or intellectual stimulation. I know for me, when my kids were 5 and 7 and I was running around town selling houses, I would pick them up from school and come home and, unpack their backpacks, and they would start their little preschool and first grade worksheets. And I would go to the kitchen and whip out a wheel of brie and some expensive wine and think I was treating myself. Now, that can be an amazing treat, but I was doing it every day, and I was getting all of my entertainment, comfort, and stimulation from food, when I was really feeling guilty about being bored and not enjoying the mom activities after school. And when I got real with myself and realized, like, you're bored and that's okay. What else could you be doing for yourself while they're doing this? And, it could be as simple as turning on a TED Talk, and getting intellectual stimulation instead of just trying to get all the joy out of a wheel of brie, which is...
That's right. And I'd love to hear some tips or techniques that you would give our audience just as they're de-stressing at the end of the day, that maybe they can change some habits, do some things different. What are some things you see really work?
Well, one of the things that we haven't really talked about that I think can help women. So the first thing that I talked about was environmental diet or detox, and that's like freeing up some of your mental capacity to make changes. So it's really hard to make changes when, for example, the first book tour stop was here in my hometown, and we had a big party and there were lots of people there, and I asked the audience to calculate how much time they thought they spent obsessing or ruminating on or thinking about their physical bodies. And in any given day, like changing your clothes because nothing fits or looks right, overeating, and then obsessing about what you just ate and needing to go exercise because of that. And there was a woman, and I said, okay, think of all the time you spend doing that. And what if you were no longer capable of worrying about your physical self in terms of how you look, and we could devote that energy to your goals? So what's a goal you have right now? And I gave the audience time to work on that. And there was a woman who came up to the book signing table at the end with her eyes just filled with tears. And this is a woman I know personally in my local community who is beautiful, and she has a gorgeous family, and she's got a really high profile career. And you would never look at her and think like she doesn't have it all together. She said, I couldn't write down a single goal because I'm so busy keeping this circus going that I don't have time to stop and take a breath and think of what else I might do. And so I'm sharing that story because many people watching may feel like that. And what we have to do is free up some of your capacity, which starts with evaluating your environment and making some changes there. But in terms of what I think is rocket fuel for this process, and listen, let me just preface this by saying 12 years ago, I was a professional couch potato. Like, I was not, in fact, I said to my coach, I'll do anything you want me to do, but I will not work out. You can't make me. And she laughed. She had a good laugh. I was so resistant to it because I thought, I don't have time, and I have better things to do in the world than be so shallow as to work out.
And today, I know you love going to the gym, and I know you run every day, right?
Yeah, I run about 5 times a week. I also am super obsessed. Do you know what a Peloton bike is?
Yes. Crazy.
I am obsessed. And this is a miracle, people, because not only was I a non-exerciser, I'm also not a gadget person. And when I did start exercising, I'm a real outdoor exerciser. Like, I ran even though it was whatever it was, 15 degrees this morning. I'd rather be outside than inside. But yeah, I mean, I enjoy moving, but here's the trick, and here's why I'm bringing up movement as rocket fuel for this process, is that I look at movement very differently. The reason I hated it before, and why most women hate it, is because we have such a transactional relationship with our bodies, meaning I will do this workout, Susan Hyatt, if by Friday I have J-Lo's booty. If I don't look
We
like
want
J-Lo
instant
quickly,
gratification.
right, we're done. It's not worth it. And so I want to help women drop that transactional relationship. Like, body, I will move you, but you better shape up, and you better shape up quick.
Mm-hmm.
And move as a form of stress relief, mental hygiene. If we are not moving, emotion gets stuck in our bodies, and that makes us sick. It makes us tired. It makes us want to go emotionally eat. And so at the end of the day, if I can motivate this audience to, even if it's just walk around the block,
Mm-hmm.
or dance in your living room, that can help tremendously.
Oh, that's great. That's an awesome tip. And I think that we need to hear that, because in a work environment, and when the stress is there, or we're sitting in front of our computer all day, it just builds up, and it's affecting us more than we realize.
Well, it really is. And honestly, I'm a big proponent for people who do work out for taking rest days, because there's a lot that happens internally that's important having a rest day. However, I will say, on a rest day, I don't feel as good as I do when I have gotten up and moved my body. It just helps process all that emotion. And as a coach, the work that I do as a coach, I'm holding space for a lot of emotion for a lot of people in any given day. And so it's just a necessity for me. I don't even look at it as I'm going to do this so I look a certain way.
And whenever you have people thinking that the Barre process is more about the food, what would you say to them?
I would say the Barre process, which is why food isn't introduced until week 3. So I don't know if you noticed that, or week 4. People typically start the Barre process and they're like, tell me what to eat. And I'm like, no, ma'am, we're not even going to talk that way. We will talk about food, but we will get there after you look at what's happening in your environment, and after we start diversifying your pleasure. Then we will talk about food, and then we will talk about movement, and so on and so on. And so the thing that I say to people is, you are able to make decisions about what to eat and how to power up your body. You are a grown woman. Like, I am never going to take food from you. This really is about a revolution and changing the conversation for women in their own lives about how they view this precious meat suit and how they care for themselves.
Yeah, and how they see themselves. That negative self-talk and that worry about, what am I going to wear today? What fits? How do I feel? Should I change my clothes because this makes me look fat? I mean, all those things. I never really realized how many minutes a day and how much mind share that takes up, and what we could be doing with that time. So that was a real revelation just in reading, a couple of the chapters. The one thing I wanted to make sure we talked about today was one of the steps that had to do with decluttering your closet. Why don't you tell us what you mean about that?
Absolutely. So I'm assuming you've heard of Marie Kondo, the KonMari method, the magic of tidying up. I have been a fan of hers since she was introduced, I guess, 3 years ago to mainstream. I have adopted one of her questions: does this spark joy towards wardrobe? Because even before I created the Barre process, I would always have my clients go to their closet, take a look, and tell me, what's the story that your closet is telling, your wardrobe? What's your wardrobe saying about you? And often women have things in their wardrobe that does not accurately reflect who they really are. And so by going through your closet, I mean, my clients typically get excited, like, ooh, Susan just wants me to declutter my closet. I can do that. But when you attempt to do this from the way that I instruct you to do it, a lot comes up, a lot of really juicy information, such as, do you have ambition sizing in your closet? Meaning, do you have that little black dress that if you just lost another 10, 20 pounds, you could finally fit into it again? Or do you have, I was somebody who had a stack of jeans of every size just in case, right? So I'm having women go through and get rid of, take out anything that doesn't fit, and evaluate every single piece of your wardrobe, your shoe collection, with the question, the litmus test, does this spark joy? Now, typically women have a lot of objections to this. Oh, if I do that, I won't have anything left, and I don't have the budget to replace anything, or there are things of sentimental value. And the truth of the matter is that no matter how your body appears today, what you put against your skin matters. There is an energy to clothing. So if you are putting things on against your skin that you don't like, or if you're like me, it was like, I just want to cover up. I don't want people looking. I want to hide. And my wardrobe reflected that. It was, I mean, if I were to share with you guys some of my real estate photos, you would laugh. It was me hiding. And I think most women are trying to dress in a way that either hides or covers them up, or isn't a true reflection of how they want to be in the world.
Well, and I was really resonating too when you were talking about all the jeans of different sizes. And I do have sections of my closet of, the ones that I know I can't fit into anymore. Actually, the majority of them now are the ones that I can't fit into anymore. But that feeling that I get when you were saying about what do you say to yourself when you walk into your closet, that I thought, oh, what I say to myself is I can't fit into any of these. And what a terrible negative thought, right?
Right.
So any advice there?
Clear it out. If you have to put it into containers in a spare bedroom or attic space or garage, get it out, because the last thing you need is to walk into your closet when you start your day or when you're trying to get ready for something, and you are fixated on and spinning thoughts about I'm never going to be able to get back into it. Oh my God, I can't believe it. Or I'm another size up, or whatever it might be. And I encourage you to, yes, either go to consignment shops or go shopping and have at least 3 outfits that you can go to that feel and look amazing on the body you have right now. Because that's the other bummer, is that if you're constantly looking at stuff you can't fit into, and then you don't like what you're putting on right now, it just creates this energy that is depleting. And then what do? We will go eat, not work out, and it keeps...
This is the vicious cycle.
It's a vicious cycle. So it's like taking charge of your closet can absolutely work miracles.
That's great. No, I'm going to do just that. And I appreciate that advice. I'm sure there's others on the line that can relate to that as well. In closing, is there anything else that you'd like to add that maybe someone could take and apply right away?
So one thing, one story that I have that someone just reminded me of that I forgot about. I mean, this was literally 8 years ago. It was actually my first publisher. I was the first book she ever published in her publishing house. And she came to me with some coaching issues that were all really centering around her not using her voice and standing up for herself. And so we created what I called the no diet. And her job was really to make a scene and start telling people no and saying yes to herself. And the final step of so she lost like 80 pounds by just saying no and standing up for herself. The final step of the Barre process is something called Be Seen, Make a Scene. And it's really about advocating for yourself, speaking up in the staff meeting, saying, actually, I don't want Chinese. I would rather go to Italian. All the ways that women delete themselves and don't say yes to themselves. I want to challenge you to go through at least the next 24 hours and say no when you mean no, and say yes when you mean yes, and see what happens.
That's a good challenge. Love that. I wanted to mention too, Susan, you have certified Barre coaches as part of your company and as part of your program. So if there are, say, some life coaches or business coaches or people that are looking for a change in their career even, why don't you tell us a little bit about what it takes to be a certified Barre coach?
Absolutely. Thank you so much for bringing that up. We're actually enrolling coaches now. So I have been training and certifying coaches for 10 years. And so the Barre Process, while it's only 3 years old, I've been teaching coaches how to coach and how to make money as a coach for over a decade. And so if you want to start a career as a life coach and this seems like a great niche to you, you can go to letsgetbarre.com and all the certification information is on there. But it basically, there's 3 months of teaching coaches the art of coaching, specifically using the Barre methodology. So if you are interested in helping girls and women drop diet drama, this is a great program for you. And then there's 3 months of teaching you how to make money as a coach, which is a totally different skill set. And so there are links on there where you can fill out an application. We'll hop on the phone and see if it's a good fit.
Yeah, I'm going to share a slide here before you go that will have your contact information. So if anyone wants to reach out to you, and also has the website, the Let's Get Barre site. And you're very active socially. So I see you on Instagram and Facebook mostly. Is that the best place to kind of follow you?
Mostly, yeah. So on Instagram, it's just at Susan Hyatt, and same for Facebook. And so reach out, tag me, let's have a conversation. I would love to connect.
And I love your podcast.
Oh my gosh, thank you. So I actually have 2 podcasts, but the podcast
I've been listening to Barre.
That relates here, right, is the Barre podcast. So it's actually, there are 2 seasons of the Barre podcast that walks you through the 7-step process, and then some great interviews with other thought leaders in this arena.
Sounds great. Well, I know that you have a busy schedule. I think you're catching a plane in an hour to head to Atlanta.
Go to Atlanta.
I'm feeling like really proud that you accepted my invitation to be on the show. And I know that my audience thanks you as well. We are going to give away a book. I thought I would just pull a name from the screen. It's actually someone I don't know, which makes it kind of fun. Her name is Dawn Cohn. So Dawn, you are the winner of the Barre book. And also, a lot of my girlfriends know, they're hoping that their name's on one of these, because we're gonna get a little accountability, and I'm gonna hand out some books, and we're gonna start the process ourselves. So
I have a book club guide. If you and your friends want to do a book club, I'll send it to you.
Okay, that'd be perfect. That's exactly what we need to do.
Right.
And it's Lent. Today's the first day of Lent, so okay. One more question before you go.
Yeah.
I always ask my guests this because I'm so curious about this concept of, what were you doing when you were 10 years old? I want to know, what was Susan Hyatt doing when she was 10? That would be around 4th or 5th grade. What did you love? What did you want to be when you grew up?
I wanted to be a veterinarian, and I had this plan that I was going to have 1 day a week where low-income families could bring their pets in for free. I distinctly remember that. And I was also writing poetry. And I was so intrigued by, I think in 4th grade, that's when we learned haiku. And so I have notebooks and notebooks of poetry that I wrote, and I would time myself to see how fast I could write a poem.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah, I was obsessed with pop music, Duran Duran, Wham. That was my jam.
That's great. And I asked that question because often people need to reflect back to what they were doing before all the social pressure and influence, and to find out who they really are at their core. And maybe there's things that you can bring back into your life that could bring you joy, such as your poetry.
That's right. I should write some Barre poems and put on some Duran Duran while I do it.
That sounds great. All right. Thanks so much. See you.
Thank you. It was a delight.
Yes, absolutely. Well, I also want to encourage our guests to join in every Wednesday at 2 o'clock. And if you registered for this show, just know you'll get reminders for future shows, and you can attend whichever ones you're interested in. Now, next week, I have a millennial who has really grown in her career at Microsoft. And she's going to be talking and teaching about how to hire, retain, motivate, and inspire millennials in the workforce. So I think a lot of you will enjoy that. This show is brought to you by K Coaching, and just know that we care about you and we care about your success. Take care.